Welcome to Pharmacy IR. I'm Scott Perkins, I'm one of your hosts, and I'm alongside Kat Collins. This is a podcast where we bring on expert pharmacists, and they talk about new drugs, they talk about their jobs, and they talk about news in the field of pharmacy. Today we have on the podcast Dr. Andy Bowman. He's a member of the North Carolina Board of Pharmacy. He's actually the president. So it's interesting to hear his perspective, and I'm really interested to see what he has to say.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. I had Dr. Bowman as a professor in my P1 and P2 years, so it was nice to speak to him and hear sort of the insider's perspective on what goes on the Board of Pharmacy and sort of in the realm of law and regulations.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, if you happen to listen to the very first episode of the podcast, you may notice that we might look very similar, and that's true. We are planners. We planned ahead. We filmed many of our interviews on a couple weeks ago, but we didn't necessarily plan for today and wearing different outfits. But
we're just going to go with it. We promise that we don't wear the same clothes every day.
That's true. Yeah, don't think less of us, please. Yeah. We're very clean people. Without further ado, let's jump into the podcast.
Welcome to Guess the State segment, where we explore some of the unique roles that pharmacists have in different states across the country and what this could mean for the future of pharmacy practice. On July 1st of 2018, pharmacists in this state gained prescriptive authority to prescribe drugs for cold sores, seasonal flu, strep throat, and to top it all off, they can prescribe statins for people with diabetes. Any idea on what this state could be? I'd have hoped you guessed it by now. That's right, Idaho is the state. In order to prescribe for these conditions, the pharmacist must meet inclusion and exclusion criteria for each patient and also notify the primary care provider of any drugs prescribed and when to follow up. And guess what? Pharmacists are now able to charge a fee for these consultations. Score! Way to go, Idaho. That's it for Guess the State. Join us next time.
Welcome to the interview portion of our podcast today. I am Kat Collins, and we are joined by the one and only Dr. Andy Bowman. Dr. Bowman graduated from Campbell University in 1993 and worked as a community pharmacist supervisor for several years before coming back to Campbell as a clinical assistant professor of pharmacy practice. So he serves today as the director of continuing professional education and has held numerous leadership positions in pharmacy organizations, including North Carolina Pharmacists Recovery Network and the North Carolina Association of Pharmacists. In 2016, Dr. Bowman was elected to the North Carolina Board of Pharmacy, where he currently serves as the president. And despite all these responsibilities, Dr. Bowman still finds time to moonlight as a community pharmacist in Harnett County. So, Dr. Bowman, thank you so much for joining us today.
Glad to be here.
So I'd like for you to tell me a little bit about your background, how you grew up, and what brought you to Campbell University.
So I grew up in Roanoke, Virginia. So I wasn't one of the North Carolina kids straight away. Found Campbell University through folks at church. I went to a Southern Baptist church. I had an interest in chemistry when I was in high school and an interest in medicine. And I got a part-time job at Revco, which ultimately was purchased by CVS, and worked there. Some pharmacists took me under their wing. I was there to see if pharmacy was what I thought it might be for me, and it certainly was. It was something that I was interested in. It took the science and chemistry thing that I enjoyed in high school, and obviously, involved with patients and so forth. I had watched, family members that had been ill. I had a grandmother that had rheumatoid arthritis very severely, and so I'd seen her taking medicines and dealing with that disease, and general things that most folks will see with kids will see with grandparents and parents with illnesses. And so tried that, liked it, started as a cashier, did everything from sweep the floor, clean the toilets, to ring the cash register, and eventually found my way into the pharmacy again. Like I said, that pharmacists took me under their wing and taught me what the profession was all about. I was very fortunate to come in at the time that I did because it was right when we were going from typewriters to computerization in the pharmacy. So I got to see the very end of typewriters with a spool of labels and the Bates stamper that you would stamp. And one of my jobs that I would have would be to take the California folders and put them back in file, because back then you had to pull the folders and pull the original prescription to document the refills on the prescriptions. And so I feel blessed, because if a year or two longer, if I had waited, I would have never seen that firsthand. And so that was a great experience to see the old operation of pharmacy. So anyway, saw pharmacy, liked it, found out about Campbell University through one of my mentors growing up, Dr. Larry Dickens, who actually is on the faculty here at Campbell now in the Divinity School. That's a long story we could for another day. But him and his wife Gail had gone here in the 70s and told me that Campbell had started a new pharmacy school. And I knew that new pharmacy schools weren't a thing. I knew enough to know that there's not a bunch of new schools popping up, and so I questioned even whether he was correct, and then researched it and found out, sure enough, Campbell had started a program, and of course, as people know that are connected with Campbell, the first one in 35 years in this country, and so had an opportunity to come down here, was fortunate to get in after 2 years of undergraduate work. Graduated in '93 in the 4th class from this program. So Campbell has been, a big part of my life. Came down here as an 18-year-old and made it through the program in 6 years, went back home to Virginia, as you mentioned in my bio there, and practiced as a pharmacist for Kroger, became a pharmacy supervisor for them, and then ultimately came back in 2000 to be on the faculty. I've been here 18, 19 years now, and so I've now lived in North Carolina just about as long as I have lived in Virginia.
So what experiences did you have in your pharmacy career that really brought you into the academic side, and specifically like the legislative side with the Board of Pharmacy?
Well, so from the academic side, and I think there's a lot of people that have this kind of experience, is you're going through a program and going through the program here at Campbell, and private school, a lot of individual attention, open door policies. We talk about the Campbell difference, and when we do, we talk about the family atmosphere that we have here, and it's kind of always been that way from a standpoint of our pharmacy program, and even maybe more so to some extent back then because there were less of us. Class sizes were smaller, and so forth. It is very intimate, and so you got to know your professors very well, and the folks that trained us just had a tremendous impact on me. Dr. Teat, who was our original admissions director, Tom Holmes, who was our Dean of Academic Affairs for years, Ron Maddox, our founding dean, and even folks that are still on our faculty. Dr. May was one of my faculty members, brand new at the time, but he taught me. Dr. Fuller taught me. Dr. Alashi taught me. Dr. Boyd, who's still here, taught me. And so all of those people, specifically Dr. Teat, Dr. Holmes, really had an impact on me. And I thought, I'd really like to do that, what they did for us with other students. And so I started thinking to myself, how can I get into that work? And so I did what a lot of people do. I graduated. I was ready to be done with school. I did not pursue a residency, which I should have. And I had an interest, ironically, in drug information, and came very close to applying for residency as a drug information resident. But didn't. Went home, ended up practicing pharmacy. Retail is what I'd known since I was 16, as I mentioned earlier, starting off with Revco. Went to work for Kroger. And a unique thing happened. I would come down here to interview pharmacy students for Kroger. And that's how I ended up staying connected. And from coming down and doing that, coming to career days and things like that to interview our pharmacy students, Dr. Maddox ultimately asked me to be a member of what we call the board of advisors, or whatever that title is these days. I was a member of that for a period of time, and that even further solidified my involvement with the school. And then the day came when they decided to to take Dr. Teet's position. He was the admissions dean as well as the continuing education director, and decided to split that position. And that's when I had the opportunity to come and be a member of the faculty. And so, the Board of Pharmacy piece was, I don't know that I could ever predicted that. I didn't really visualize that for myself going forward. When I was working at Kroger, it wasn't necessarily something that was on my mind when I first got here, but pretty quickly I realized that there might be an opportunity there. What basically happened is the folks on the Board of Pharmacy at that time wanted to hear from the schools of pharmacy on a fairly regular basis. And so they requested that the deans at UNC, Campbell, and Wingate send a person as a liaison to the Board of Pharmacy meetings. And so what would happen would be every other month or so, I would get up in front of the board and I would tell them what was going on at Campbell. And a colleague would do the same thing for UNC, and one of my counterparts at Wingate would do the same thing. And that got me involved there, and I started running for the Board of Pharmacy. I knew the first time that I ran that I probably would not win. I got a handful of votes. And I was running against a gentleman that was an independent pharmacist, and independent pharmacists do very well in those elections in North Carolina. And Joey McLaughlin won. And then after 5 years, it was time for him to run again. And I was running against an incumbent. Again, I knew I probably wouldn't win, but I got even more votes. And then after he had served two terms, 10 years, he was unable to run again. And so now the Southeast District was opened, and I ran again for a third time and thought, I might have a chance this time. And I was fortunate. North Carolina Mutual Wholesale Drug got behind me as a candidate. They also supported another candidate in the election, but supported me as well. And at that time, if you think about it from a numbers perspective, that was 10 more years of Campbell graduates. And I was able to get a lot of Campbell alumni to vote for me. And so, we ended up in a runoff, which happens a lot with board elections. But at the end of the day, I was able to secure the position and have been on the board now for 3 years, now serving as president. And it's been a wonderful experience.
Yeah, that's great to hear a story of perseverance and how that can work out in your favor if you just keep.
Yeah, I mean, and the first Campbell, to be on the Board of Pharmacy, which is a testament to what we've done as a program. It's not about me. It's about Campbell University. It's about, getting to the point that we have enough graduates that we can put somebody on the board. And I'm awful proud of that for our school.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
What do you think are some of your personal characteristics that make you a good board member and a good professor, and how do you think you've developed those over the years?
I think one of the things that I hear people say about me, and I'm not very good at pointing out strengths or don't want to be perceived as being braggish or whatever. But people tell me that I'm a good listener, and I think I am. I think I can listen to circumstances when there's a case that comes before the board, and you've got somebody that's in a difficult situation, whether it be someone that has made some bad decisions in the pharmacy, or whether it is someone that has a substance abuse issue that has cost them their license and they're trying to get that license back. All the things that we get involved in. I'm good at listening and trying to understand other people's challenges and things that they face. And I'm the same way with students. I think most people would say that I'm a person that they can walk in the door and kind of open up their heart and say, this is what's going on in my life, and I'm having some real struggles. Sometimes it's simple. Sometimes it's, Dr. Bowman, help me with this calculation problem. Sometimes it's, a personal family issue that's going on. And, good or bad, we experience so many things individually in life with our own personal experiences, our family experiences, and so forth. And so, God never gives you more than you can handle. And I truly believe that. And, He has put some things on my plate that have been a big challenge. And what I have tried to do is take those challenging things that have happened in my life and use them to help other people. So whether it be giving them some advice that might keep them from the situation that I'm in, that I had been in, or it could be just being someone that can listen and truly understand what they're going through. Might be the loss of a loved one. I lost my brother to a terrible, rare cancer. And so we've had a number of students that have had losses in their family, brothers, sisters, parents. And in some cases, we've had students that have dealt with cancer personally. And so those types of things, so yeah, I think that's probably the thing is that personal touch for me. And being open and a good listener.
And who would you really say was Andy Bowman, the student? And what sort of advice would you go back and give yourself if you could today, going back and talking to that student? Yeah,
I think looking at me as a student, I was scared to death, like a lot of students are. I might have lacked some self-confidence. Maybe to my own detriment in some cases. I wish I could go back and say, hey, be a little more confident. You're going to be okay. I think like a lot of students, you get stressed out and you're looking for an opportunity to, not study and take a break and so forth. And I think maybe, give yourself a kick in the pants if you could go back and say, don't go shoot baskets or go do this with the guys or whatever. Study for another hour or two. I think I would have probably as well, although it worked out for me, I would have go back to my past self and say, pursue that residency. Now, I was fortunate. I still got into academia, but that's pretty rare for somebody without a residency. And today, you just about couldn't do it without a residency. So, I think that would have been a benefit to me. Would have changed, obviously, probably what I did completely from a standpoint of the early part of my career. If I had done a residency in DI, for example, I probably would have never worked in retail, or if I had, it would have just been part-time or something like that. So our students today, and I can really dig back here and give you the recipe that I think makes what we have today an issue. But, remember that going back a couple, 2 or 3 decades, you had programs that were, BSs in pharmacy. And only a small group of students would get their Doctor of Pharmacy degree. And when Campbell started their program, that controversy was afoot in the pharmacy profession. And, Dr. Maddox, President Wiggins were trying to decide what to do with this program. And so as they looked at it, they had consultants here, and they came up with, we don't know what's going to happen in the profession. We don't know if it's going to go all PharmD for sure or not, but we're going to go ahead and go all PharmD, and we'll see what happens. And sure enough, we go all PharmD, no BS degree, and the profession ended up flipping. Right. By the year 2000, all programs in the country had to convert to PharmD only. And so that was to our advantage big time in the early years. But now, it's been a number of years now, a couple decades have passed, and we've produced a lot of PharmDs into the workforce. And so now we have to find another way to differentiate ourselves as graduates. And because yes, there are still BS pharmacists out there, but they're folks that graduated quite a few years back. Sure. And so students are looking for ways to differentiate themselves, and I think residencies is a great way to do that. And so obviously it's gotten very competitive in that market, and but we've done well here at Campbell with matching in that regard. So I would tell myself, Andy, go do that residency.
Were you involved in any organizations or any projects while you were a student?
Yeah, so
how did those help you?
Going all the way back. I mean, I was involved from the get-go. As a freshman, I was president of the dorm of Burcott Dorm while I was living there. I became an RA, so I served as a resident assistant my sophomore year. Both freshman and sophomore year, I served as an SGA class representative. And then once I got into the program, I was involved with NCAP and ASP, APHA. I joined Kappa Psi, and my officer position for that was Sergeant at Arms, which was the disciplinary in person. And so I was involved with that. And Those were the big things that I was involved in. But, that was in the early years, and we were all kind of all involved with everything. I mean, it was kind of a different world. It was a smaller group of people, and, it didn't really matter what organization you were an officer in. Everybody seemed to be involved at some level in everything. And so some of my best memories of those days when you start talking about organizations was we would do things like have a faculty-student basketball game. And so the students would play the faculty, and remembering, going back to remembering Dr. Maddox and Dr. Holmes and Dr. Greenwood and Dr. Fuller and Dr. Ronnie Chapman, who actually had played some college basketball, and going out there and trying to compete with those guys, and everybody being there. And it was just a big event. So it was a different day, and it was fun.
Well, I'm glad you say that, because we know it and have that Campbell Games is. We've had it once in the fall, now we're having it again in the spring, same sort of thing with students versus faculty. So that's fun. We're sort of bringing it back.
Yeah.
So I want to talk a little bit about your non-pharmacy passions and sort of how you deal with the work-life balance and how you manage all of that together.
It's a challenge. I think it's a challenge for anybody in the role of being in academia. There's always something going on. It is difficult to put away. If you're working in a community pharmacy, for example, usually you have a partner, and when you're done with your shift, somebody else takes over. You leave them some good notes, and then you don't really have to think about that. But with our jobs here, we have a lot of things, balls in the air at one time and so forth. And I remember talking to one of my colleagues, Dr. Perkins, Friday of last week, and Dr. Perkins talked about how he was basically going to work all weekend on various and sundry projects related to Campbell. And I think a lot of us get into those activities. One of the things that I've tried to do as it relates to that is just do some things that I enjoy. The things that I enjoy outside of pharmacy, I love to work in the yard. So I will try to manicure my yard and my mulch beds and all those types of things. I'm a car person. I'll like to wash my cars and fiddle around with those. I might do some minor work to my cars myself. Dr. Boyd and I both share that pleasure of working on cars, and we've kind of done that together a little bit sometimes in the past. I love college athletics, so I will go to sporting events. A few years back, as you guys know, I got involved with, I had done some radio work as a pharmacist, where I would do call-in shows where people would call and ask pharmacy-related questions of me. Did that back in Roanoke on WFR, and then actually did it down in Fayetteville since I'd been on the faculty here at WFNC. That ended probably around 2005, 2006. And some folks in the athletic department were looking for a color commentator for football, and someone mentioned me and my love for football, and had watched some games with me and knew that I knew the game, played some high school ball, and that I had done radio. And had never done sports broadcasting, but, married those two things together, and it actually worked. And had a great first season doing that. It was a blessing to me. My brother was diagnosed with cancer about that time, and he was so excited and proud for me. He enjoyed football as well, and was actually on the chain crew at Virginia Tech. And so at all the Virginia Tech home games, he would be up there doing the chain crew. And now I had my opportunity to be involved with Campbell football as a broadcaster. And so first season was in the booth with Chris Haymeyer. And then after that, although I do make an occasional appearance in the booth as a color commentator, I moved down to the sideline, and I'm the sideline reporter. And that's completely different. And then both of them are great. I love the booth, but being on the sidelines with the players is a lot of fun too. And I actually have a young man that is a friend of the family that is potentially going to come down here to play ball this fall. It's not decided yet, but I'm excited about the possibility that my involvement with the football program and my love for Campbell University might be bringing a friend's child to our campus.
Sure, that is exciting.
Yeah.
Well, we're going to take a quick break here before we come back and talk a little bit more about your job specifically. But before we do that, I'm going to put you on the spot with a little bit of a rapid fire question round. round here. We're going to go 1 minute, and you're just going to have to answer as quick as you can.
Oh, goodness.
We're going to really see if those radio skills can stand the test here. All right, so we got a timer going. And we are starting now. Ready? Ford or Chevy?
Ford.
Favorite city in the U.S. besides the one you live in?
Nags Head.
Nickname your parents used to call you?
Oh, gosh. I don't know that I had one. Okay, Dandy, because sometimes my brother was Dan and I'm Andy, and they would sometimes say Dandy because they just were in a hurry to yell at us.
What's your favorite holiday?
I like Thanksgiving.
Scale 1 to 10, how good of a driver are you?
I'm a 10.
What age do you want to retire?
I'd love to retire at 60.
Invisibility or super strength?
Super strength.
Who do you admire the most?
My dad.
What's your favorite summer activity?
Going to the beach and relaxing.
If your life was made into a movie, what genre would it be?
Oh, I don't know. Probably a drama.
Who's your favorite cartoon character?
Oh, gosh.
That's it. I don't know. We only got through about 10 questions. We'll have to
So
see
did I not do a very good job?
I'm not sure. We'll have to see how the other interviewees stack up to it.
Maybe I put too much thought into it. I'm still thinking about it. You know what? Let me give you the cartoon character. I'd like to be Iron Man.
Okay.
Yeah, Iron Man.
All right. We'll be back in just a moment.
Hey, welcome to the Drug Limerick Challenge portion of our Pharmacy IR podcast. I've got 3 wonderful students that are P2s that are with me today. So I'm going to have them introduce themselves, and I'll give them the instructions for what we're doing today and their chance to win our awesome prize. So without further ado, Andrew, go ahead.
Hey guys, I'm Andrew. I am a leader in Phi Delta Chi. I'm also part of the National Community Pharmacists Association. I'm a part of APHA as well. And here's Austin.
Hi, my name is Austin Price. I'm also on the leadership board for Phi Delta Chi, and I'm also a student ambassador at Campbell University.
Hi guys, I'm Brody Lawrence, and I am involved with Phi Delta Chi as well. I'm the bylaws chair, and I'm also a student ambassador.
Awesome. Great. So guys, let me tell you how this works a little bit. So I'm gonna read a drug limerick that I wrote. It's 2 lines that rhyme, and then 2 other lines that rhyme, and then the last line kind of wraps it up. So for this particular limerick, the last word of the last line will be the drug name. So you guys have to guess that. And if you are able to guess it, I'm going to give you this wonderful Creek coffee gift card. It's a lot. There's a lot of money riding on this right here. So, yeah. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and start it up. Okay. I'll give you guys a couple opportunities, and if you don't get it the first time, I'll let you look at it. But I believe in you guys. You guys are all 3 smart gentlemen. So without further ado, let's do it. Okay. All right. I make you go pee. This much is known. But HCTZ is set in stone. Increased BS, potassium distress, the hero of all hats. Do it again. Okay. Let me read it one more time. Okay. I make you go pee, this much is known. But HCTZ is set in stone. Increased BS, potassium distress, the hero of all hat. It's a 4-syllable drug.
It rhymes with distress.
It's in that same kind of category, or in a way.
It rhymes with distress?
It rhymes with known and stone.
Oh.
I'll give you a hint.
Okay.
Think of Dr. Herring. So it's similar to HCTZ. So I make you go pee, this much is known, but HCTZ is set in stone. So it's not hydrochlorothiazide, and it's the hero of all hats.
Oh my gosh, Aaron would be so disappointed.
Oh my gosh, this is not.
You got.
It is with own.
It begins with C.
Chlorthalidone.
Yeah. All right, chlorthalidone. You guys both got it. Andrew started just before Brody did, so I'll give it to Andrew. It's all right. It's all right. Great.
He'll still share.
Yeah, you guys can share a cup of coffee. You guys were brave enough to come on, and I appreciate you coming on today. So thank you.
Hi there, we're back here with Dr. Andy Bowman. Dr. Bowman, we'd like to talk a little bit today about the jobs that you do currently and sort of what are the main features of your job as a professor and your job on the Board of Pharmacy.
Right, so I came here originally as the Director of Continuing Professional Education. So obviously pharmacists have to do continuing education to maintain their license, and like most healthcare providers do, lawyers, insurance agents, there's a lot of folks out there in the world that are, generally it's people that are licensed to do something, and we fall into that category as pharmacists, and so we coordinate programs out of my office for pharmacists. Our biggest relationship being North Carolina Mutual Wholesale Drug. We do 3 big programs for them a year. We also have some partnerships with some hospitals and some other groups and organizations. We do some things internally here at Campbell with grant money. We have the Community Pharmacy Institute that we've been doing programs with for about 3 or 4 years now. And so a lot of different things there as it relates to that. Obviously, teaching is a big responsibility here for me. Pharmaceutical calculations is something that I started to get involved in after about my 3rd year here. Patient counseling was something that I started to get involved with as well, and that course has now been integrated in the new curriculum, but I also still teach an advanced patient counseling course. And now, and I'm really excited about it, I'm starting to get involved with the law course, and I'm the course master for that starting this block, and I'm going to be slowly taking over that course from Dr. Boyd, who's been teaching it for more than 2 decades now, and so I'm excited about that. The Board of Pharmacy experience has actually opened up the door for me to do that. Clearly still have a lot to learn. Dr. Boyd's got years and years of experience and knowledge in that area, but hopefully slowly over time I will be able to utilize him as a mentor, as well as my experience on the Board of Pharmacy, to be the person in the future that does law here for us here at Campbell. And then we're all involved in so many committees and so forth. The one that probably is the most time consuming for me, but is a love of mine, is the admissions committee. Being involved with the interviews of new students, I actually have had the opportunity to go and do some recruiting for us. There's an area where I'm from in Virginia, Southwest Virginia, that I think there's a bed of talent there from a standpoint of students, and a lot of them just don't know that we're here. And so a lot of students tend to be state-centric, I call it. It's probably a word that I made up, but they tend to not look outside the borders of their state for pharmacy school, or for any graduate program for that matter. There are some people certainly that will come from one side of the country to the other that are real free spirits or whatever, but most people are not that way, and so I like to go up there and go to different schools and make sure that they know that just down the road in Bowie's Creek, North Carolina, we have Campbell University, and talk to them about what we have to offer down here and our years of success and experience. And so in the fall I will visit, Virginia Tech, Radford, JMU. This year I went to UVA, and just make sure folks know we're here. So that's my Campbell job. I do work part-time as a pharmacist, as you mentioned in the intro. For many years I worked for Walgreens as a part-time pharmacist. I stopped that in 2017, and now I work for an independent. I work for Relo Pharmacy up in Lillington. There's about 18, 19 stores in that small group of independent chain, I guess you would call it, owned by Joey McLaughlin, ironically, who I replaced on the Board of Pharmacy when he termed out, and so I mentioned his name earlier. And we have a lot of graduates that work for Relo Drug. So if you start looking at them as an employer, Joey has hired a lot of our alumni here, and so that's been a great experience to see independent pharmacy as opposed to chain pharmacy. Good experience for me there. And then the Board of Pharmacy. That is kind of hard to really package when you're not involved in it. You go in, you start going to meetings, and you really start to understand what it's really about. On the outside, you get a glimpse, but you certainly don't see all of it until you're completely involved. And there's a lot of responsibility in it. You're a part of, to some extent, you're a part of state government. You're a board that is regulated by the state government, and you have to, commit to the Ethics Act every year, do ethics training. You're in North Carolina, we are elected by the pharmacists in our state. We're the only state that does that. And our board is small. We've got 5 pharmacists on our board and 1 appointed non-pharmacist. So we have our state broken up into 5 districts, and then our public member, who's Robert Graves right now, who is a sheriff. He was the former sheriff of Randolph County. So with the opioid crisis, that's been nice to have.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So anyway, it's been a great experience so far. I've learned a lot about the legislative side, the regulatory side, and one of the things that I think, and we may end up touching on this later, is realizing that to a great extent, pharmacy practice, laws, regulatory is different from state to state. There's a lot of different things going on out there, and we tend to know what's going on in our playground, but we don't really realize what's going on across the border or across the country as it relates to the practice of pharmacy.
Sure.
Yeah.
What are some things that the board is involved in that you think students or people, pharmacists, faculty, staff, wouldn't necessarily know?
I think one of the things that we get involved in, anytime there's a legislative bill or anything that's going on, most often we are asked to give feedback. That usually happens through our executive director, Jay Campbell. He will give them feedback about what the bill might do from an impact on pharmacy perspective. If we have concerns about issues, there's been a couple significant things that have happened legislatively that we've had a voice in. One, the STOP Act, which took effect at the beginning of last year, so we're a year into that. The STOP Act was to slow down the number of pills that were being prescribed, both for pain control and post-operative pain. And then the HOPE Act, which was to help provide additional involvement from law enforcement. They felt like they needed better access to patient records so that they could chase down the bad actors out there, the people that are doing the things that are inappropriate with opioids, whether it be white collar crime or otherwise. In some cases, we have had prescribers that were doing too much from a standpoint of overprescribing opioids. There's been some that are in jail now for doing so. And so we've got some challenges there. And so had an interesting meeting back in the fall where we were sitting down with law enforcement and going through, okay, you guys need access to patient records. Let's figure out a way to do this so that the optics are good from a standpoint of, let's say, a patient in a pharmacy. And sometimes we take a lot of things for granted in any business that we're in where we're the expert and other folks don't know all the details. And so sometimes you just have to sit down at the table and say, this is what this will look like. And then the light turns on. And I remember vividly one of the things that came up was, let me give you an example. You want to come in and get records. What does it look like to the patient that's sitting there waiting on their prescription when a police officer comes into the pharmacy once, twice, frequently? Okay. Does it look like the police officer is just there as a patient? Does it look like they're there because the pharmacist is some kind of bad person, a technician that's done something wrong? Is this a safe place to get my prescription filled? There's police here. You have to think about patient perceptions. And so we had to talk through some of those things. And those are the kind of things where I get excited because we're able to help provide insight and information that can help us make good decisions as a state and as a legislature. And so those are the things that I've really taken away as being beneficial to pharmacy, beneficial to patient care. Our charge is to protect the public health and safety in all that we do. And so that's our focus. Yeah.
So how do you integrate on the Board of Pharmacy? What do your colleagues come to you most often for, and what kind of expertise do you provide?
So I try not to go overboard from a standpoint of the detail of the law as a board member, and there's a number of reasons for that, but if it's something that I know the answer to and it's fairly basic, I will help my colleague, help my friend that has reached out to me. But a lot of times I refer them to Mr. Campbell, Jay Campbell, our executive director. Jay's a pharmacist and a lawyer, and he knows the law inside and out from a standpoint of how it all works together. It's an incredibly powerful degree combination that I don't have. And so I know where my limit is on what I'm comfortable answering, because the last thing I need to do is give somebody misinformation. And so, but do I provide insight to folks that have questions about the law? I do it, yeah, frequently. But if I'm not 100% confident, I refer it to the expert.
Sure.
Yeah.
How do you see the North Carolina Board of Pharmacy sort of in respect to other boards of pharmacy and other states, and like how is North Carolina progressive or maybe not so progressive?
So we are progressive. We are one of the states, and there's a handful of them out there that have a CPP or a Collaborative Pharmacy Practice Act, where a pharmacist that is in a collaborative agreement with a physician can actually write prescriptions and change prescriptions and so forth. And so that is progressive in that regard. I would tell you that from the national level, going to big meetings where boards of pharmacy from all over the country are there, and Canada, which I think I knew in the back of my head, but when I went to my first NABP meeting, National Association of Boards of Pharmacy, and realized, oh wow, there's the provinces of Canada as well. It's a big group, and I will tell you, and I'm not saying this because I'm on the board or because I'm just proud of North Carolina, we have a board that is well respected nationally. Part of that is because of the history of the board and how progressive they have been. Prior to Jay Campbell being the executive director, David Work had been there for many, many years, up to 3 decades, I think, and he was well respected in what we had done. But Jay has taken that to a whole nother level. Jay is serving as president-elect of NABP right now. He's involved all over the country in pharmacy, and he represents us well as a state. And so I think we're still progressive. I think there are states out there that are doing some incredible things that we're not doing, but I think we will get to those things as well.
Great. So what are some important things that you have to keep in mind when you deal with pharmacists that come through the board for disciplinary action, things like that?
That's an interesting question. I think one of the challenges has been, and I saw it when I was involved with NCPRN, the North Carolina Pharmacist Recovery Network, and then we ended up moving that over into the North Carolina Physicians Health Program, that sometimes I'm going to run across folks that either A, I know because I've worked with them, or B, they've been students of mine. And that's been hard. It's been emotional for me. I hate to see any person to have the challenges that folks face that end up in those situations, but there's always a story. Students graduate from the program and they generally have the world by the tail and have a powerful PharmD degree. They're going to make a good living. They're going to have an opportunity to do a wonderful thing in serving patients. But life happens, and whether it's the loss of a marriage or some other personal difficulty, sometimes people make bad decisions with alcohol, or they make bad decisions with medications that, look, we have access, right? Healthcare people have access, and who has better access to drugs than a pharmacist? And people are going to make bad decisions, and I just hate to see that play out. And so I've had to learn to not get overly emotional about that, to try to look at that situation as independently as I can, and provide as much support and understanding as I can. Some folks, if you start polling pharmacists around the state, there's some folks that aren't as they don't give as much grace to people that get in that situation. I provide a lot of grace there. I want to see what we can do to help that person. And if they go through the proper steps and they get into a program and they follow the program and continue to do what we ask of them from a standpoint of staying clean, most often these folks get their license back. And that's probably been the thing that's been the biggest challenge. The other challenge is and that's obviously an emotional challenge. The other challenge is, what are the limitations of the Board of Pharmacy? And so you start to find out very quickly as a regulatory body what you're allowed to have input on and what you're not allowed to have input on. And so sometimes there are things that are pharmacy practice issues that you wish that you could get involved in as a board member, but they're really not in your purview as a regulatory body. I get a lot of emails and calls from folks about how challenging working in chain pharmacy can be, for an example. You know, I'm exhausted, I'm filling too many prescriptions, I don't have enough help, I don't get a lunch break, I can't go to the bathroom, all the things that you've heard. Going in as a board member, I thought that I would be able to have a bigger impact on that than I have been able to, because frankly, the Board of Pharmacy is not the group that is going to help and make that change. That's more of an NCAP type of a responsibility, the lobbying group that represents the profession. And so, sometimes people come to the board and those things are a part of the issue that, let's say they made a prescription error, and then they get up there and they start talking about, well, here's what I deal with. This is my working environment and so forth and so on. And look, I've been at the bench, I've been behind the counter, I know how challenging it can be. And so, that's a tough thing to manage.
Sure.
Yeah.
Before we end, I'd just like to ask you, if you have any advice for students who are interested in pursuing academia or even the legislative side of pharmacy, and how they can sort of differentiate themselves and push themselves to be a good candidate for those jobs once they graduate.
Yeah, so from the academic perspective, as I mentioned earlier, talking about residencies. I mean, if there may be some people out there that are still getting into academia without residencies, but I'm sure it's few and far between. If you want to teach, you need to be thinking residency. You need to be thinking about, and it doesn't have to be any one particular residency. It's you can do it with all of them and end up in academia. And you can look at that on our campus. We've got folks that from all walks of residency life, so to speak. You've got Dr. Perkins, who's a DI expert. You've got Dr. Trotta, who did a community pharmacy residency. She's now on our faculty. And then you've got the guys that do the big gun stuff, like the infectious disease, cardiology, oncology, and those types of things. So that would be one. Get involved as a student from a standpoint of student organizations. I think it's important that you try to get an understanding of what's going on in practice. I bring this up a lot in class. I say, have you heard about this that's happening in the profession? And the students aren't always as tuned into it as I want them to be. I really want them to get tuned into the profession. And so one of my pieces of advice would be, this is going to be your profession. I turned 50 this year. There's other people on our faculty that are turning more years than that, and we're going to be basically handing the baton to you guys as young pharmacists. It's going to be your profession to move forward and to take care of and to protect to some extent. And so get involved, hold leadership positions, hold offices. And then when you get out and you're looking for opportunities to get involved and you have those opportunities, don't be afraid to fail. One of the things that I had to get used to was putting my name out there and losing an election. That was not easy, and it's not for everybody. To put your name out there, to run for something, and to see the number of votes that you get versus the number of votes somebody else gets, that's humbling. And to be willing to do it again and then to do it a third time, it takes a lot of perseverance sometimes, and it takes not getting what you wanted the first time. But look, let's be honest, I'm a much better member of the Board of Pharmacy 10 years removed from the first time that I ran. I would have not nearly have been as big of a benefit to Jay Campbell as the executive director, as a member of the board with 10 less years of experience. And there's been a lot of things that I've been able to help him do on the board because of my academic background. And so that's one of the nice things about it. So those would be the things that I would tell students. And we always had Jack Watts, the late Jack Watts, who used to come to our graduation, very involved here at Campbell, was on our board of trustees, and he would always say at graduation prior to his passing, to get involved. That was his statement to students at graduation, and it's no more simple than that. Get involved. Students need to be involved in the profession. If you have issues with things that are happening in the profession, speak up, get involved, have a voice. Use NCAP and other resources to make sure that we have a voice and that we are standing up for our profession and that we're trying to advance it. It might be provider status, which is something we haven't talked about today, but that is something we're all hoping for.
Well, thank you for being involved in this podcast, and we thank you for listening out there. Please join us for our next podcast next month, and thanks again. Thanks.
Thank you.
Well, that's it for episode 2. I enjoyed having Dr. Bowman on, listening to his perspective. What were your thoughts?
I thought it was great really to see his career path, because it's a little bit different than the professors that we get to interact with on a daily basis, more clinical side, and he's really got a different outlook, and so it was great to talk to him and sort of see what's going on in
Yeah, it was interesting to have a perspective of someone from the board of pharmacy, I think, as well. So I think he brought a high value to the podcast today. So Dr. Bowman, if you are watching, thank you very much. We appreciate
he's watching. I know he's out there.
Oh, I'm sure. He might like to watch himself a little bit. So. But that's it for our episode 2. If you would not mind, please look in the description below. We have a link for a survey, and we'd like to get some feedback to help potentially improve our podcast. Maybe you have some new ideas for new segments, or maybe you have some ideas for people that you'd like for us to interview.
Absolutely. Be selfish and let us know what you want to hear so we can bring that to you.
Absolutely.
And join us next month for another episode and another immediate release.
All right. Thank you.